study the three seals of the Dharma. All things are impermanent, nothing has an ego, and nirvana is quiescence. This is the fundamental teaching. Everything derives from this teaching, core teaching, and we learn the dependent origination. Whoever you speak among the Buddhist scholars, this dependent origination is the content. In fact, content of the enlightenment the Shakyamuni Buddha was awakened to. So this is an important teaching. And again, this from here, all the related teachings, fundamental teaching, Four Noble Truths, truth of suffering, cause of suffering. We understood that the cause of suffering is craving, tanha, and extinction of suffering, and the truth of the way. So eightfold path, suffering means the things do not go as we wish, as we desire, and we keep craving for happiness, keep praying for the better situation, and all these four sufferings and the eight sufferings all together in one of the sutras, in Mahayana and the Theravada sutras, and verses suffering, aging, illness, death, association with what is displeasing, separating from the loved ones, not to get what we want, and all the clingings based on our senses are suffering. So we understand the root causes of suffering and how to overcome that. The Eightfold Path, three components, wisdom, morality, and meditation. Right view, if you pick up one of them, right speech, whether or not we do not tell a lie, we do not say something behind someone's back, we do not distort the reality or make judgmental comments, we react to someone's emails. So all these things, that the warm-hearted and kind, peaceful language and words to be used through this right speech, and all the actions, right action, livelihood, and paying 100% attention to what we are doing now, and be grateful for what we have, and be content with what we have. So these things, the kind of concrete practice of Buddhism through Eightfold Path. And if we practice these eight paths, then we can attain wisdom, and that will lead to the liberation from suffering. So right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right efforts, right mindfulness, right concentration. So I think all these things you are already practicing, but it's important for us to be reminded of this and go back to different Eightfold Path from time to time. Check your own words, your own action, whether or not you have already overcome your own selfish perspectives, sometimes egocentric perspectives, and try to have this selfless, perspective, insight to see things as they are. So those are important practice in Buddhism. And now we are entering into Lotus Sutra today, and Saddharma Pudarika Sutra. And Lotus Sutra is a fundamental teaching, and Dharma Kosei-kai is starting on from its existence, birth, and founder Nuano encountered the Lotus Sutra. And founder Nuano gave us his own contemporary interpretation of the Lotus Sutra. And the Lotus Sutra is written around 100 AD, so that after Christ. We use Christ as a reference. So the perhaps 600 years after the passing of the Buddha. So it's important for us to understand the context in which the Lotus Sutra was written. And let us study. The Lotus Sutra has 28 chapters. And we like, some people like, I know Rose likes chapter 20. Never despise. Bodhisattva never despise, now changed to never unworthy of respect. Slight change to the title. Some people like chapter 12, Devadatta. It's in a way evil person who tried to kill Shakyamuni Buddha, but still recognize that person as a friend. Without him, Buddha was not able to be enlightened. So, and some people like the chapter 3, burning house, parable of burning house. Some others like the stupa rising from the earth, chapter 11. So you know already different chapters and the different features of the Lotus Sutra, but let's use this intensive study session to understand the Lotus Sutra better. And today's session is basically gives you the historical background, context from which Lotus Sutra was born, understanding the structure of the Lotus Sutra, and then understanding some of the key messages from the Lotus Sutra. And of course, it's a lifelong practice and study. So you have already begun that journey, and you have to continue that journey. You can't understand the Lotus Sutra just by looking at some of the explanations. You have to live the Lotus Sutra. So it's a long way to go, but today let's focus on some of the historical context, the overall structure of the Lotus Sutra, and some key messages in the Lotus Sutra. So this is a little bit complex, the chronology of Buddhism, but most important thing is about 5-6 BC that the Buddha was born. And then early Buddhism was there, and then the Buddhism were divided into some schools. And you know Theravada Buddhism that from India to Sri Lanka, Thailand, Laos, and the southern stream of Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, and the northern stream, Mahayana Buddhism, from India to China, to Korea, Japan, and even Vietnam. So that southern and northern stream of Buddhism, it's Mahayana Buddhism, and the Tibetan Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism is regarded as late Mahayana Buddhism. So you can understand the different streams and schools, and you can study this at a later time. But the key point is Buddhism, it's always difficult to maintain the original spirit of Buddhism, original understanding, and Shakyamuni Buddha's original intention. And over the years, people interpret, people are deeply deeply following the Buddhist teaching, but different interpretations, different angles, and some adjustment has been made to the original teaching. And some strength in the adaptation, some weaknesses to the adaptation. So it's understandable over the years, and the creative way to reinterpret Buddhism, original Buddhism. So creativity, adaptation, and kind of different cultures are also involved. Buddhism it has been spreading. So those are the context, historical context of Buddhism. And a few points I would like to single out. About 100 years after Buddha's passing, 100 years after Buddha's passing, there was the Buddhist council. And in that council, there was two different schools already. One is more kind of conservative and literally observing what the Buddha said. And another one is trying to see the real intention of the Buddha when the teachings were told. So the Susabira Nikaya and the Mahasanghakita Nikaya, so two streams were divided after 100 years post Buddha's passing. And then another disputes, some of you may know the King Ashoka, famous king, emperor in India, who was devout Buddhist follower himself, and he contributed to the spreading of Buddhist teaching across the continent. And understanding of doctrinal and disciplinary Vinaya, it says, understanding have caused some divisions. Different schools emerged. About 20 of them, 20 different schools emerged. So already after Buddha's passing, there are different schools, major division to 2, then 20, about 20 schools. And one of them was very influential, Sarvastivada, and it's elders, the group of elders, very influential, 3rd century BC. That understanding, that schools understanding of Buddhism, or what the Shakyamuni Buddha said, was quite important. And I summarize some of the deviations from the original teaching, original Buddha's words. So 5 elements. One is emphasizing the difficulties of practice. So the Buddha's time, Buddha's focus was, it's a simple practice. It's everyone can understand, everyone can practice. So that was the essence. But over the years, that changed. Only some people understand this, and it's difficult to practice. And the second point, making Gautama Buddha a superhuman. So Buddha was a human being, and Buddha himself was emphasizing everyone is equal, total equality. But the many people, the disciples of Buddha and the followers, elite followers of Buddha, raised Buddha's profile, and only a few people, only a few select people can reach that point. So that kind of elitism emerged, and elevating Buddha as a superhuman. So that is another element. And third is limiting the scope of those who can attain enlightenment. So elitism says only a few people can get to enlightenment. Some of them can reach arhat, total liberation from suffering, understanding Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, but not really, reaching the Bodhisattva or Buddha. It's difficult. You can't do it. And the only place you can go is arhat, but still, you have to join the monastic group. So it's a small number of people reaching arhat, or reaching bodhisattva is impossible. Reaching Buddhahood is impossible. So that was the teaching. And then changing the scope of disciples of the Buddha. I already mentioned the Sangha, so only monastic, and no lay people, no women. But it's different from the original Buddhism. Original Buddhism had lay people and women disciples, high disciples, female disciples, wisdom number one among female disciples in the original Buddhism. So there is elitism and formatism brought the Buddhism to this very relatively narrow understanding of Sangha and those who can attain Buddhahood. And then stupa. Stupa, after Buddha's passing, the followers erected the stupa, in different countries you can see stupa. But it became a little bit too much, and the formalism was there. So Buddha is there, just worshipping stupa. But where is real teaching? Where is the Dharma? That was missing. So after the Buddha's passing, all these phenomena I summarized, from equality and freedom to formalism and elitism. So that was a tendency, and by the time the Mahayana Buddhism emerged around 50 AD, and Lotus Sutra was born out of that Mahayana tradition, but this is the tendency at that time. So you may know that the Hinayana and the Mahayana distinction. Hina is small, and the Yana is raft, or we call it vehicle, right? And Maha is big vehicle. And Hinayana, I mentioned that the influential group called Sarva Stivada, that group, and Hinayana group understood that the Bodhisattva was the one who is qualified and destined to become the Buddha. So Bodhisattva notion is very small, and Bodhisattva is just before Buddha. So only the person who's destined to become a Buddha can become Bodhisattva. So it's almost impossible for ordinary people to become Bodhisattva. And then monks, as I mentioned, in a monastic community, unless you become monk, they can reach highest level mental state, it's arhat. So that's the maximum level you can reach. And then Mahayana came. Mahayana said, all are bodhisattvas, not only a few people, but everyone. You are bodhisattva. And the Shravaka, Pratonika Buddha, different categories of disciples, you are bodhisattvas. But so that then that Mahayana said equality for all, women, lay people, enlightenment. But in the early Mahayana Buddhism, there was discrimination. Early Mahayana Buddhism, there was discrimination, differentiation. So that Prajna Paramita Sutra and Vimalakirti Sutra, those are the early Mahayana sutras, and they said all can become Buddha except Shravaka and Pratonika Buddha. So though there remain remnants from the Hinayana Buddhism, smaller vehicle, and even Mahayana, everyone can become Buddha except those people. So that was the early understanding of Mahayana Buddhism. Here is a reason why the Lotus Sutra was born. So division and differentiation between Hinayana and Mahayana. Divisions and discriminations within Mahayana tradition. Lotus Sutra tried to overcome those. All the divisions and the differentiations. So that's the reason for Lotus Sutra. So once again, in our sutra recitation, you encounter Shravaka, Pratonika Buddha, and Bodhisattva, three vehicles, right? And the Shravaka voice hearers, the listening to the Buddhist teachings and trying to liberate his or herself from suffering. That's important to practice. Second is Pratonika Buddha. He meditates and try to understand the truth of the world and try to maintain the calm and peace in their minds. But Bodhisattva is serving others. So it's not the only personal salvation, liberation, but helping others in liberating themselves from suffering. So it's there is a difference between 1 and 2 from 3 vehicles, but still within the early Mahayana Buddhism, which is supposed to be big vehicle, everyone can join. There was discrimination still. So that the Mahayana, early Mahayana teaching, Shravaka and Pratonika Buddha were not allowed to become a Buddha. So that the Lotus Sutra surpassed that, overcome that. And if I summarize the points, so Lotus Sutra tried to return to the original teaching of the Buddha. As I said, after the Buddha's passing, death, many different interpretation schools. Some became conservative, only stick to the precepts, rituals, too rigid in their interpretation. Another side, a little bit more liberal, open, and flexibility, and try to understand the true intent of the Buddha. But still, within both schools, there were divisions and discrimination and limited understanding. And returning to the original teaching of the Buddha was the intent of the developing the Lotus Sutra around 100 AD. So 3 points: overcoming discrimination and division between Hinayana and Mahayana, honoring Buddha nature dignity for all, and celebrating unity in diversity, and assuring everyone's enlightenment, everyone. So that's the essence, and this is a story of the Lotus Sutra, and we will study a little bit from this one. We have 28 chapters in the Lotus Sutra, and the first part from 1 to 10 chapters. If you look at the blue column, you see the title of the chapters. And first part, 1 to 10, were taught in the, it's called Voucher Peak. It's in the real world. In India, there is a place. And I put the picture there. Some of you may have visited that Voucher Peak, where the Shakyamuni Buddha taught the Buddhism. And that was a place where first 10 chapters were taught. And some of you may have visited already. And I visited about 5 years ago. And you see chapter 1, so calling everyone, big teaching is being taught, and the Bodhisattva Manjushri and Maitreya came and preparing the ground for the big teaching, right? And the chapter 2, some of you like chapter 2, skillful means. And Shariputra is the character, and the upaya, you know, it's a skillful means. It's in Sanskrit, it's called upaya. Upaya, up is close, and aya is go and come. So this upaya means, skillful means, is the fastest, swiftest, quickest way to attain enlightenment. So enlightenment is a goal, and we employ skillful means. The Buddha employs skillful means to get you to the enlightenment as quickly as possible. So that the upaya, skillful means. And chapter 3, already skillful means is understanding of the parable, is burning house. You know burning house, and the children were suffering in the burning house, but they didn't realize that they're in the serious danger and so on, and totally absorbed in playing games, and house was in the meantime in flames, and the father was calling children, get out, but they didn't understand. And then the Buddha or father came up with the idea, toys are loved by children, so they put a goat cart, deer cart, and ox cart. So different type of toys were given to children. Children came out from burning house immediately, that they liked toys. And then the Buddha father gave different things. Ox cart, but white ox cart, much better than the toys, 3 toys they wanted. So that's the understanding of skillful means. And the Shravaka, Pratonika Buddha, and Bodhisattva, 3 vehicles. But actually everyone. So Lotus Sutra is accepting everything. So Shravaka, Pratonika Buddha, and I mentioned in the early Mahayana Buddhism, still there was a division, discrimination, differentiation. But this burning house says all three are the same. You're already walking the path to Buddhahood. So it's a revolutionary affirmation of everyone. Then chapter 4, the chapter 4 is a faith and understanding, and the different parable was stated by four Shravakas, Subhuti, Mahakashayana, Maldogari, now Mahakashapa. So four Shravakas, they try to explain how they understood the teaching, Buddha's teaching through wealthy man and poor son. You recall, some of you may recall this important parable, and so that this is again father and son, and the son left the father's very rich man in the childhood, and about 50 years he was wandering around. He didn't know that he had father, and he jumped from one job to another, suffering all the time. And after wandering, son unexpectedly went to his father's very rich man's, wealthy man's mansion. But he didn't recognize his father. And he was scared. And he spent about 20 years after that encounter, working on waste management, clearing away excrement. So 20 years. And he didn't know that he was a son of that father. And eventually, gradually, overcoming this inferiority complex, he finally discovered that he was the son of the Buddha. So that's the poor son's parable. And here again, there is many teaching. We will go back to 7 parables in the Lotus Sutra in this intensive study, but it's important that the father was a Buddha, and the son, poor son, was the son, and 4 Shravakas, and father gave treasure to 4 Shravakas. Buddha nature is the treasure. So, and it's important that absolute equality, Shakyamuni Buddha taught in the early Buddhism, 3 out of 4 Shravakas were from the Brahman caste. So waste management was done mostly by outcast in the ancient India. So there was a very important message here, the rejecting caste system and accepting and affirming everyone's Buddha nature. So that's also there. And chapter 5, you recall all the different plants and the rains of love and compassion coming to all the plants, different types of plants. And it's called the parable of the medicinal herbs, and respecting differences, honoring different identities. And you should know that in ancient India, particularly northwestern India, in the Gandhara region, you can see a melting pot in the ancient era. So the Indians, Persians, Greek, Central Asians, they are all there. And the culture from the East and West, Hellenism, mixed East and West. So that this honoring and celebrating diversity, unity in diversity, is also in chapter 5 of the Lotus Sutra. And chapter 6 through chapter 6 to 9, you see different Sravakas, different disciples, getting assurances of Buddhahood. You can become Buddha. You also can become Buddha. So from chapter 6, so the chapter 2 and 3, the Shariputra was given assurance, Shariputra, wisdom number 1. And then chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, the Subhuti, Mahakashana, Mahakashapa, Mahamadugari, Anna. So different types of disciples, particularly Shravaka. Someone understand, the Subhuti understand the emptiness very well. Debate number 1, and seeking alms number 1, and the supernatural power number 1. Different disciples received assurance of becoming Buddha. Chapter 7 and 8, Purna. Purna was the preaching, spreading the Dharma number 1. Purna. Purna got assurance. Chapter 9, Ananda. Ananda was always accompanying Buddha, and he was hearing the Buddha's teaching number 1. So Ananda received the assurance of Buddhahood. So from up to chapter 9, you see different disciples, and particularly under early Mahayana Buddhism, excluded from the Buddhahood or Bodhisattvahood. The Shravaka and Pratonika Buddha, they received assurance of becoming a Buddha. So that's a revolutionary story the Lotus Sutra has. And from there, chapter 10, still we're in the virtual peak, and gradually story changes to the handing over to a future generation. So Buddha was already 80 years old, and he was his time is nearing the end, and he wanted to transmit and transfer the lamp to succeeding generation. So after his passing, how to practice the Dharma was the important message from chapter 10. So up to here, from 1 to 10, all the teaching were taught in the virtual peak, in the real world, and now we are moving to the sky. So next one, this is from 11 to 20, all the way 22. Next section is taught in the sky. So it's a ideal vision of the world is taught. So the as I mentioned, chapter 11, you may recall, big stupa appeared, arose from the earth, about half the size of the earth. It's a big stupa, and the Buddha was there, and the Tathagata abandoned treasures were there, and the Buddha brought everyone to the sky. So it's a dynamic movement. So you were on the ground, on the reality, and you were going to the Buddha's world, vision in the sky. So chapter 11, stupa, and the stupa again is important because stupa became the kind of formalism within the Buddhist community. So people want to worship stupa, and Buddha's remains were there. But Buddha said that going back to the original teaching of Buddha, particularly you recall the making yourself the Dharma, making the Dharma the light, making yourself the light, and making the Dharma your light. So that was the words of last words spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha. So I'm not in the stupa. I'm in the Dharma. I taught everything in my life, and you can find the Dharma teaching in the Dharma itself. So that's the so everything, every story, every analogy, parables relates to something happening in that world. So stupa was used because ordinary people can relate to that and understand the message clearly. And then the chapter 12 again, chapter 12 is Devadatta. And you can recall the Devadatta was a cousin of Shakyamuni Buddha who became extremely jealous of wonderful Shakyamuni. And he tried to create his own group independently from Shakyamuni Buddha and tried to even kill him. And Buddha said, without him, without the friendship, that friendship, he interpreted as friendship, I couldn't reach enlightenment. So that was the Devadatta. And another thing is 8-year-old dragon girl. So it's not human, but dragon girl was enlightened. So that the chapter 12, Devadatta, the one thing is Devadatta, in a way, in a normal interpretation, the evil person get assurance of the Buddhahood, and then in the Brahman tradition in ancient India, dragon animal, 8-year-old is not capable of attaining Buddhahood, of course, or even practicing Buddhism. And in the ancient India, female, the discrimination against women was strong. So all these combination, and this is absolute equality, equal dignity for all, and everyone can become Buddha. So a very strong message was taught in chapter 12. And then chapter 13, as I said, from chapter 10 through 13, 14, it's about after my passing, that the Shakyamuni Buddha said, how to practice and disseminate, spread the teaching to the succeeding generation. And chapter 13, Shakyamuni Buddha taught the standing firm on the teaching. And here, different bodhisattvas, about 2 million bodhisattvas came and volunteered to spread the teaching. So that they volunteered. 2 million bodhisattvas volunteered, but Buddha said no to them. Actually, they said they can teach the Lotus Sutra. We can do it, Buddha. Please entrust us to teach the Dharma, but not in Saha world. They said Saha world is a world of human beings. Human beings are too arrogant. They are too self-centered, and it's difficult there. So I can't do it. We can't do it in Saha world, but other worlds, please entrust us to teach the Dharma. So there was some hesitation there. Saha world, our real world, it's too difficult to teach the Dharma. And that the difficulty was explained in the Lotus Sutra, in the verse. So all the obstacles. So that's the important section in which the teaching the Dharma in Saha world, the real world, with all the arrogant, in a way, ignorant people, is extremely difficult. That was written. And chapter 14, patience is important. Managing emotion is important when you spread the teaching. So those things, chapter 14 is there. And chapter 15, again, millions of bodhisattvas came and volunteered to teach the Dharma. But Shakyamuni Buddha said, no, we don't need you. And innumerable bodhisattvas emerging from the earth. And that's the chapter 15. And already from the earth, many Buddhas, that the bodhisattvas appeared, and Buddha said, you are competent. You can teach the Dharma in the Saha world. And of course, question came, and they're all the golden bodies and all the enlightened bodhisattvas. But Buddha, you left the crown princehood at the age of 29, enlightened at the age of 35, and now you are 80 years old. You taught the Dharma only 40 years or so. And how come you train these bodhisattvas? So that was a question, big question mark. The life was very short, and why innumerable bodhisattvas are there from the earth? And they're so wonderful, and they are ready to teach Dharma. Why? And Maitreya represented that worry and question, and asked that question to the Buddha. And chapter 16, you know this important heart of the Lotus Sutra and the eternal Buddha. And here, the parable is the physician's children. Physician children, and of course, physician is Buddha, and the children took poison, right? And Buddha was trying to save them, but they're so obsessed with their life, and they didn't take the medicine. And then Buddha left the home and sent the note, the letter, to the house saying that Buddha passed away. And children got realized I lost my father, and that brought back the consciousness of the children, and they took the medicine and got cured. So so that the passing of the Buddha, so that Shakyamuni Buddha passed, was a skillful means, upaya, to make the children, ourselves, understand that they have already good medicine, wonderful medicines in front of us, but we haven't taken that. And when once children realize that that was our mistake, we didn't know how important my father was. Father came back alive. So this story, Physician's Son story, is about eternal Buddha, and we are all destined to become a Buddha, and so that's a very important part of the Lotus Sutra, eternal Buddha concept. So that Buddha died in real life, Shakyamuni Buddha died in real life itself was the skillful means to bring you to the Buddhahood. So skillful means, again, upaya means the most effective, efficient, quickest, swiftest way to bring you to the Buddhahood. So the chapter 16 used the last result, so that I passed, I'm dead. And that brought back the real consciousness to the children ourselves. So that's the amazing story, Physician's Son story in the Lotus Sutra. And then from there, you have chapter 20 is Bodhisattva never unworthy of respect. So this is a famous story that this Bodhisattva didn't actually read the sutra. What he did was, every time he said, I would never despise you, I respect you, every time. If I'm beaten, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? I can't become the Buddha. Or are you being sarcastic? So all those comments and the reactions, sometimes he was being beaten up, he left, he escaped. So took some time and come back again with his palms together. So that's the Bodhisattva never unworthy of respect, and fundamental practice of Risho Kosei-kai. And chapter 21, 22, it's an entrustment by the Buddha to you. So after my passing, now you are entrusted by me to spread the Dharma. Chapter 21, 22, and all the bodhisattvas going back to their respective regions, realms, to spread the Dharma. And the rest continues. So this is from the sky. Now from 23 to 28, coming back to Eagle Peak. You see the picture there. So coming back to the reality. So now you understand. Wonderful vision, dream, aspiration of the Lotus Sutra world. You go back now. You have everything. I gave you everything. Dharma, teaching, and the vision. And you have the mission to spread the Dharma. So that's the rest of the Lotus Sutra. So everything is amazingly kind of harmonized in the Lotus Sutra stories, beautiful parables, and the teaching, and the different characters appear. And so it's a rich sutra, and we are so lucky that Founder Niwano interpreted it and gave us his teaching. So just to finish, so chapter 3, parable of burning house, opening of 3, Shurabhaka, Pratonika Buddha, and Bodhisattva, there were differentiations, but bringing them back to one Buddha vehicle, and the parable of burning house is the story. Chapter 4, parable of poor son, wealthy man, a poor son. We understand everyone can become a Buddha intellectually, but we are faced with this sense of inferiority. We can't. I don't think I can. Poor son spent many years waste management and overcoming inferiority gradually, step by step. And finally, after 20 years of practice, that the father gave all the treasures to the son. And the father waited patiently for this poor son. So that's the compassion of the Buddha. And then this is chapter 5, parable of medicinal herbs, celebrating unity in diversity. You see this Afghanistan had that remnants. It's Buddha and Hercules. Hercules is the guardian, a protector of Buddha there. So it's I mentioned that the Indians, Persians, Central Asians, they're all mixed. And the chapter 5, parable of medicinal herbs, different plants, and equally receiving the compassion, the rain from the above. So that's the chapter 5. Chapter 12, Devadatta, you see Devadatta was trying to kill Buddha. Jealous, out of jealousy and other sentiments, but the Buddha regarded those treatments, those reactions, as a way to bring himself to the Buddhahood. That's why for him, Devadatta was a best friend in his. So love your enemies, that other traditions say. The enemies, your enemies, are the skillful means or friends, best friends for you to attain Buddhahood. And then dragon women, and some people misunderstand this. She had to show the dragon girl had to show the transforming ones to women in order to become enlightened. But all those Shravakas, very experienced disciples behind the women, girl, they were so attached to the traditional understanding, the old-fashioned interpretation of Buddhism, and they couldn't believe that women or 80-year-old can quickly attain Buddhahood. So she had to show it. She had to change to men and monk, and before she got enlightened. So that's the way to make those men, monks, understand the real meaning. So that's the skillful means. And chapter 16, lifespan of the eternal Buddha. This is children, poison, and father left and seeking when the children got the message that the father died, they decided to take the medicine. But before that, they couldn't do it. And this death, passing of the Shakyamuni Buddha himself was a skillful mean to make us understand that unless you become desperate, you become sincere to seek teaching. It's difficult to understand the Lotus Sutra. So this is a parable to explain. It's important for us to seek. Seeking is important. Once you seek, you drink good medicine, and the Buddha reappears. So that's the message. And then chapter 20, this is part of Risho Kosei-kai practice. Whoever we meet, our brother James always mentioned the cherishing every encounter. So in reverence, so putting palms together, that's the deep practice of Buddhism. So you can see from these slides the wonderful teachings you have already studied, but you can restudy these teachings, and the wonderful messages are here in this important sutra, Lotus Sutra.